Hey guys, Kyle here. So, just before the show starts, I wanted to mention our Patreon. You can pay us $1 a month as a thank you, as a tip. You can pay $2 a month to get access to one of our bonus content shows, episodes 2 days early, and a secret Discord chat where all of our Patreon donors get to go and hang out and talk with us directly. Then there's a $5 tier that you can donate to get access to a whole bunch more content. We have multiple bonus episodes on there. So please check it out. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We don't advertise. We don't make money. So check it out and throw some money if you think that would be cool. Thanks. Welcome to It Gets Weird, our comedy show where we explore the unusual, the unbelievable, and the unexplained to try and make your world a little weirder. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Nile.
And this week, Nile, you got to experience Kyle from I don't know how many months ago now.
Yeah, there was a bit of this is a bit of like almost like a makeup episode where a thing that I probably should have watched back when we did these episodes has now gets to be covered. So
yeah, so many months ago now. It might even be a year at this point. I have no idea. Which, speaking of, coming up, Nile, very soon, 7 years of It Gets Weird.
Oh, really?
Yes, which. Like 5 years, 6 years, that's surreal enough. But something about the number 7 really fucking weirds me out. I mean,
well, Kyle, it's a holy number, so
true.
It's the God's number, 777. All those things. It's like the angel. No, it's not. It's not the angel's number. I think that's a different thing. But anyway, yeah, 7, holy number.
Right.
So yeah, it doesn't work for you.
Now, I thought 3 was a holy. I guess a lot of numbers are holy numbers, right? So it's because the Holy Trinity or whatever. But what makes 7 holy? Is it just because of like lucky slots in Vegas?
I honestly forget what the 7 is, but the reason 666 is a thing is because it's 1 under 777, which I think is the angel's number. So it's like it is the like, it is metaphorically like one off of God, so it's the fallen or whatever.
It's also, going to be, it's the thing that they put in, like barcodes, so that you can like get, you can go buy your groceries and then they'll scan your barcode, and every time you get your groceries and scan that barcode at Meijer, you're getting a little inoculation of the devil there, right?
Yes, that's why there's that story on the internet that goes around of a cashier at a Whole Foods, like having the person they're checking out refuse to let them scan anything and making them manually input all of the numbers on the back because the scanners are like radiation or whatever. Yeah,
yeah. That's funny. I
you become that person.
Yeah, and I think there was somebody in the Discord for the It Gets Weird Discord. Donate to the Patreon, patreon.com/itgetsweird if you want to get access to our Discord at the $2 level or the $5 level. But I do believe there was somebody in the Discord who sent a video where it was like, I want to say like a late 90s video of like,
the music video thing?
Yeah, is it the music video? Wasn't it like Japanese or something?
I don't remember.
Or am I thinking of something different?
I don't remember the Japanese part, but
I know what I'm confusing it with.
Okay. What is it?
Sorry. There is a very similar video in a Red Letter Media video, which is a YouTube channel that I occasionally dip into. But we had a music video sent to us, right, about barcodes. Am I remembering correctly?
I believe it was barcodes, yes. It was, the music video mostly took place in a grocery store.
Right, yeah, which, for people who don't know, there is a whole thing with, I want to say in the 90s, maybe late 80s, where especially weird Christians believed that the barcode would contain the number of the beast, like the way that we handle barcodes or something. I don't quite remember. But it makes me think of the lady drinking she's not actually drinking
Monster Energy can.
Monster Energy can. One of my favorite phrases of all time, bottoms up and the devil laughs. I try to live by that idea personally.
Yeah, we got some, I've seen your booty shorts adorned with that phrase, you know? That's really good.
It's just there's this very weird paranoid side to things with barcodes for whatever reason, and it has something to do with 666, but that is so not what we're talking about today. Many months ago, I basically did a UFO cover-up series. The United States government covering up the existence of UFOs, and then the cover-up of UFOs, essentially.
Disinformation, along with counterintelligence, all the stuff that the government does to basically confuse the fuck out of the UFO community.
Yes. And, we went from I wanted to call him Arnold Palmer. What's the fucking Arnold? The guy who Kenneth Arnold. Kenneth Arnold.
Yeah.
So Arnold Palmer back in the 50s.
Mixed lemonade and golf with just a little bit of tea, and really got something.
And that's it's a delicious beverage to have when you're out in the field, looking for UFOs, right? But little known fact, he also was the first person to sort of accidentally have the term flying saucer coined around a sighting back in 1947. And Roswell would happen shortly after that. And there's a whole story there. But I basically covered the original Kenneth Arnold sightings, some alternate information, because we've done that episode too. Some alternate information surrounding the Kenneth Arnold sighting and the Maury Island incident where he supposedly got to investigate a crashed UFO. I went from that and followed the trajectory of this mass UFO government, almost like false flag idea that like the government is falsifying UFO experiences against its own public. And I followed that all the way to the Paul Benowitz story and Linda Moulton Howe. And I'm saying these names now, and we're going to get into it. But the reason I'm just explaining all this, in the title, you can already see it. We watched the documentary Mirage Men.
Yeah. What a change in terms of the documentaries we watched for this podcast. Like, this one felt so like
competent.
Yeah, there was a level of professional aptitude along with just like it. There weren't places where I was like, oh, fucking come on. Like there was never any of that kind of stuff in this one. This feels like a legitimate documentary that I don't have a lot of qualms with.
Yeah, I think that generally it works. One, because its presentation is like, one of the things that you run into with documentaries on UFOs, the paranormal, it really tries to drum up melodrama. It tries to manufacture intensity. Like there's all these things that they do that this documentary doesn't lean into as hard as, say, a Jeremy Corbell style documentary, which has been a generally pretty negative experience for us. But I also think it helps that I think that this documentary's stance, for the most part, is it's not neutral, but it is most definitely saying there's something weird going on with UFOs and the government. I think that that's in a sense true, but it's worth unpacking as well.
Yeah, and I think that the thing this documentary has going for it is that it's not trying to convince you of something. It's not trying to convince you of of aliens existing. It is looking at people who believe that aliens exist or don't in some cases, and just trying to prove to you that there has been some level of effort by the government to effectively stir the pot and confuse the matter, and doesn't specifically try to tell you what exactly they're covering up for or not covering up for. It just says they use a mixture of real and fake information to basically confuse and keep the UFO community monitored.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing.
Yeah. And I was just, right off the bat, because I've already seen this. I watched this documentary to get myself prepared for my 3-part series on this. I do own the book Mirage Men by Pilkington, I believe is his name. And yeah, Mark Pilkington. And it's, I haven't read through the whole book yet. It's on my long list of things to read, but I'm already doing so much shit, but it's on my list. I have it sitting at my desk right now. And I assume it gets into more details about specific stuff brought up in here. At least that's what it seemed like so far. But I'm just curious for you. Like, when I first watched this, I had not heard the Paul Benowitz story, really. I mean, I'd kind of picked up a little bit. I'd picked up a little bit beforehand, but I was just like, well, Mirage Men seems to be the one of the main places to start with the UFO cover-up story. And so for me, this documentary, when I was done and like kind of had my cursory research done, I was like so baffled. I was baffled, I guess. I'm getting less and less baffled. I also noticed on this watch through that they had people from that I wasn't fully aware of when I did the UFO Cover Up Live episode about the TV, I don't know what you would call it, TV show about UFOs, where they brought in they brought in Shandera. They brought in there's like one of the writers is in this documentary. They bring in a couple people from that as well, although they don't talk about UFO Cover Up Live. But
the cast of characters in this documentary is really interesting because it does an interesting thing where it introduces you to somebody before the thing that they are in the documentary for happens. Yeah. Like there are people that you get to why they're in the documentary later, but they are part of the community. So there's little like they get used before that. So you kind of get seated on who these people are. And then it's like, oh, here's why they're in here. Because like Linda Moulton Howe is in this documentary, and some of the people for Project Serpo are in this documentary.
Yes.
And they feature throughout basically the whole documentary in talking heads, but you don't get into their part until later, until it comes up in the story. And it is just like, I kind of like the structure of this documentary in how it kind of introduces you to all these different things and shows you this kind of interconnected web that is all centered around the one, the only, the bastard Richard Doty.
Yes.
And then also Richard Doty might be the most frequent talking head in this entire documentary.
Yeah.
And this was one of the more emotional experiences watching a documentary for this show, because you really grow to kind of hate Richard Doty throughout watching this.
Yeah.
And to the point where like there are times that he says things and then they immediately like cross cut into someone like basically telling you either the effect of the thing Richard Doty said or how it actually happened, and like they confirm that he's either lying or playing to you at all, like every single time he talks. And it really sweeps you up into it a bit.
It does.
I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, I mean, and this is why that was also part of why when I got into the 3-parter that I was like a bit intense through parts of it, is because like
it makes perfect sense now.
Yeah, and just to be clear, in case you haven't listened to those episodes, go back and listen to them because that's probably going to be the best way to experience our experience with this documentary. But the short version is Richard Doty, Air Force Special Intelligence, basically another man named Paul Benowitz, who was some sort of scientist, I think a physicist, saw UFOs, reported them to the Air Force, and the idea is that Richard Doty would then feed him fake information about aliens, and that information kept building. They kept fucking with Paul Benowitz to the point where he had to be institutionalized. He was like a paranoid wreck, and it fucked up his entire life. And we, like, you know, there's certain things that are like harder to confirm. I think it's pretty much confirmed. Richard Doty, it was in fact working with the AFOSI. What level he was in on these things is unclear, because at the end of the day, Richard Doty seems to be just like a serial liar. Like he is just a fucking liar. You can hardly ever tell when he's telling the truth about anything, and that's the point.
Yeah, he is such a fascinating figure to watch in this documentary in like the most. I look, it's overstating to say the most evil way, but it's kind of how you feel watching this if you like, because like he creates this web of informants and people he's fucked with and all of these like people that he has led astray, and like you can trace a lot of modern UFO lore to Doty's misinformation.
Yeah, that was, I think, the part where my brain started to collapse, was like, oh my God, some of the biggest things in ufology throughout the decades in this country, it can be tied back to this ridiculous story, all of this shit happening here.
Yeah.
And if it's all been a fucking, you know, con job or whatever, it's crazy to think that this is now the lore of UFOs forever, apparently. So it's this is such a deep insider like UFO story, but at the same time, what I also like about this documentary is if you don't really know that much about UFOs or ufology, you can still watch this and understand it. Like, I think the only thing you need to know is like, well, you know, Roswell was a thing. If you somehow live in the United States and have no idea about the idea that there was a UFO that crashed in Roswell, then you might be a little confused. But generally, the layman can pick this documentary up, and I do highly recommend watch if you're, you know, already in this episode. At this point, I do recommend watching it.
And it's available free on all of your freemium kind of streaming sites.
Yes.
So like Tubi, Pluto, YouTube TV.
Yeah.
Free with ads on all of those. So it's pretty easy to come by. It is really, really interesting.
Yeah. So I kind of you kind of already led up to something that I wanted to ask you.
Okay.
But I'm going to ask it properly so that we can maybe tease it out a little bit more. How did you feel watching this? Just generally. You don't have to get into anything specific, but like what was your feeling watching this? It's a weird question, but I'm curious.
It is, because like it's one of those things where I was legitimately mad at Richard Doty at the end, and
yeah.
But also there's this whole thing about him that it's not it's not him as a man, it's him as what he represents, and that is this malicious idea that it is worth whatever cost for the government to be able to have secrets from the people. It honestly threw me into this weird like just disillusionment with the concept of nations in a weird way. Like I don't know where my head was when I started this, and it's a very like, look, it's an extreme thing to come to with this, but the concept of this just being a thing that we'll probably never get straight answers about, and also like he could still be doing it, and even if he isn't, 1,000 guys just like him probably are, is really just gave me a kind of feeling of disillusionment. It was I don't know. It was an interesting documentary to watch in the middle of my day, as I was like, I was expecting a lot of the stuff we watch for this show. You get through it, you take some notes, and it's like, oh yeah, the documentary was fine. It told a story that's kind of interesting. You don't have a lot of emotional reaction to it. This one was a little different.
Yeah, I think doing 7 years almost of researching UFOs and stuff, you can't help but get a little emotional watching this. Because I mean, like, there a lot of what was, also brain breaking for me when I initially watched this was like, we had talked previously about Project Serpo, which was like supposedly this program to send people to another planet to, it was like a program to
like astronauts sent to an alien home world type thing.
Yeah. And like that coming up in here, and especially like how you described where it's like they are constantly showing like the counterpoints from Richard Doty. Like there's a whole section in here, and I had read about this too, where it was traced back to, because like Project Serpo was like posted online in these online bulletin boards about UFOs in the late 80s, early 90s. And when they were able to like trace back the IP address to, the anonymous person who was like supposedly leaking this Project Serpo stuff.
Group of people. It was multiple,
yes.
like, yeah.
Well, it was Richard Doty, who was like one of the prime people that they were able to like compare IP addresses with some other thing, and they figured out, yeah, it was fucking Richard Doty who was involved with Project Serpo. And again, it's like 2 years ago, we covered Project Serpo without that knowledge ever popping up in the episode. Like we did not I don't think we brought up Richard Doty in the episode on Project Serpo because we just found sources on Project Serpo online that like so many of these things are now detached from like where it came from, and it just operates as a part of the UFO mythology.
The part in the documentary where it just cuts to Doty and he's like, and because he still goes, at least at the time of this documentary, was still going to like UFO conventions and stuff and just like sitting in lectures and hanging out. And he was just like, I still go and I hear things that I remember leaking to so-and-so, and it just now is completely divorced from that and is still, that information is still in the community and everything. And you're just like, oh, this is evil.
Yeah. Yeah, he's and again, it's really like it's so hard to take things that he's saying at face value. One of the things too that I just find despicable is him just being like, oh, I'm a good friend of Paul Benowitz.
We became friends, and I told him as a friend to stop doing this.
Yeah, that like, oh, Paul, you need to let this UFO stuff go. It just reads as so scummy. Yeah, it just reads as very scummy.
This is a pull that not everyone will get, but he almost comes off like when you're listening to like Hulk Hogan try to talk out of character, where just like, I cannot believe a single word that you say, and even you're not even sure what you believe. You're just like, you live in your own world, and there's no way for us to cross that boundary. It's like it's entirely worthless to listen to Richard Doty talk because you cannot treat him like, you cannot take anything he says.
Yeah, he does in fact talk like Hulk Hogan in a courtroom. You know who he also kind of reminds me of, because he is often talking with this like stupid smug little half smile, is fucking Bob Lazar. He reminds me of Bob Lazar. Bob Lazar like is more blatantly, dull I think Richard Doty might be a smarter man than Bob Lazar, or at least more clever. But they just seem almost like they have maybe the same personality type or something, because it just comes across very smug.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I just yeah, this was definitely worth watching. It put me through a bit of a journey. Because like when I was starting, I was like, okay, when I'm taking notes on a documentary for something like this, you usually start taking pretty detailed notes, and then after a time, you kind of figure out the pacing of the documentary, and you might not take as many as you keep going. My notes on this doc are extensive, because I never I was typing throughout most of its runtime.
Yeah.
It just kind of keeps going, and in a way that it's not like it's just. It never feels like those documentaries where it just seems like they present something, give you no backup, and then just present a new thing. Like there is a craft throughout it that guides you through this story really, really pretty well, and they flesh out the things they need to make their point pretty well. So there's a lot like it. It starts off with the Robertson panel and talking about how certain people, including Bob Durand, who's in the documentary, who's talking about this stuff, think of that as like the beginning of the idea of controlling the public narrative on UFOs, and that's kind of so that's like the original source point for all of this stuff is that the Robertson panel in 1952, and it honestly really kind of makes me want to try to look for any source about Roswell from pre-1952, because I would be curious how much how things changed before and after that, because looking at how much impact Doty had on the narrative of Roswell by way of William Goode, it would be interesting to look at sources pre that point,
Yeah, one of the things that I remember finding was that the original Roswell story had been retracted. There was an originally published story that I can't remember the terminology that was used, but it does refer to something akin to like a downed disc, like craft.
Okay.
And that story gets retracted and I believe replaced with the weather balloon, the weather balloon thing or something like that. I can't quite remember. It's been a while since I looked at this, but that was pre, Robertson panel stuff. It would be pretty hastily changed. I don't know whether I'm falling for some sort of disinfo thing though on that. But I've seen.
Do you want to get into the spiraling paranoia complex this documentary could give you in trying to do this podcast?
Yeah, sure.
The psychic damage that trying to Okay, so the thing that I think I at least have going for me is that going into an episode of It Gets Weird, I never am under the impression I'm giving a totality or the absolute truth of any given situation.
Yeah.
Just because we're talking about conspiracy theories. Most of the shit's made up. We all know that and accept it. So you're here for the story. But once you start interpolate, trying to factor in the misinformation stuff into that, how do we ever know what to cover?
Yeah, it is hard. I mean, like I said, I read this story. I saw this clipping about Roswell from way back when, but I don't know. I don't know if what I saw was real, I guess. I mean, I do tend to think that because I found multiple sources saying, and it's, I'm trying to cross-reference this stuff, but multiple sources saying, yeah, that was, or multiple sources talking about, which I think is even in the, I think it's in the Mirage Men book, where they're talking about, oh God, I recall that the special unit that was tasked with dropping the bombs on Hiroshima was also involved with the I think the retraction of the Roswell story. So these are things that I've read from a couple different places. I think that might also be in Mirage Men. But again, it's like, is that something that somehow came from the Doty era? I don't know that 100% for sure.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but I guess at least like in that regard, like with there's a lot of other things in this that I'm like, that is still paranoid, but more plausible to me than aliens. You know what I'm saying? Like, like how they do lightly suggest in this that there were these cattle mutilations in an area where there had been this nuclear a project, right? And they wanted to like test levels of radiation.
Let's talk about this.
Yeah.
So this is because this is getting into targeting me specifically as someone who's one of their favorite conspiracy things is the Dulce base and deep underground military base phenomenon. So they get into a whole thing about how Dulce base is basically. Let me go down to the place in my notes because I have the specifics of it. So yeah, this is coming about. They get into this by way of cattle mutilations, talking to Gabe Valdez and Linda Moulton Howe and a couple other people who basically over the course of 20 minutes run down that cattle mutilations are real in the fact that cattle do get kind of cut up and parts taken for them as samples, but in reality it is a government project related to getting information about radiation in cattle, because back in 1967 there was a thing called Project Gas Buggy, where they basically tried to use a nuclear bomb to frack like natural gas, and because of that now they basically take samples out of cattle in the desert in that area. Using black helicopters with a bunch of lights on them to emulate UFOs to gather these samples and test to see the radiation leakage out of this underground fracking experiment. So for the same thing, they have disinformation around the Dulce base in general. The Dulce base, that's the alien human hybridization program and all this stuff. It's a secret underground military base in Dulce, New Mexico. They have black helicopters substituting as faked UFOs, doing cattle mutilations. And they also then have more cover-ups for other military testing stuff in the area around Dulce base. Like it is just like this thing where in doing a thing that is kind of silly or stupid, they then have 3 conspiracy theories spring out of it and them covering it up. Yeah. It's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah. It's also very similar to the entire idea at why Skinwalker Ranch is the way that it is. Yeah. Which is to say that there was, they tested nuclear stuff there or near there. There's cattle mutilations or whatever that's happened there. And one of the conspiracies around it is exactly the same thing, where they were using black helicopters to take cattle, test them, cut out their shit, and stuff like that. But that one goes even further, because then they also suggest that there were basically human test subjects in the area. The supposed whistleblower that came, but I really think a lot of what Skinwalker Ranch is about is probably really just trying to monetize the goddamn thing. At the end of the day, which here's the other really unfortunate angle to think about with all of this UFO stuff is the fact that so many people are in it for money. You know, it's another angle to this, and people are trying to I think even Richard Doty at some point writes a book with, who does he write a book? He has an involvement with a UFO book at some point, I'm pretty sure.
I think I saw that online one time when I was looking at stuff. I was like, Richard Doty wrote a book?
Yeah, it was with an ex Air Force, another ex Air Force guy, I want to say. I can't remember. It's a big name in ufology, so I apologize for not conjuring that off the top of my head. But there's just always the opportunity for money. Like Linda Moulton Howe, for instance, I also get. I look at her and I see her kind of, maybe she's got some dollar signs in her eyes with a lot of this stuff, which sucks because like she was, I believe, a legitimate journalist. She really talks herself up in this documentary. She's like talking about herself as this dogged journalist because she's also involved with the cattle mutilation aspect, which
they also like there's a part where she says that where it's literally her quoting Doty, where she gets called in for the meeting about the cattle mutilation documentary she did, and is just supposed to get like some names and numbers of contactees or whatever, and Doty just starts like really like buttering her up and telling about how we didn't expect a real journalist to be doing stuff about this cattle mutilation stuff, and then shows her these full-blown documents that are related to Project Serpo, which is an entirely fake thing. Like, it's the web. I keep bringing it up, but the way all of this stuff gets connected through Richard Doty is fucking phenomenal. It's wild.
Yeah, and I really love the part where Howe is like, it's like it seems to be a sort of candid moment where she like stops the documentarian talking to her off camera and says like, well, what's the angle? Like, I don't want you to dismiss this UFO. I don't want you to like dismiss the phenomenon. And you hear the person off camera say like, we're not dismissing it. We think something weird is going on here. That's not at all what we're trying to do. So, I don't know. It's all strange. It's all very strange.
Yeah, it is. This is like a really interesting documentary. It almost feels like one I'm going to have to watch again to like fully piece together everything, because now I know what to look for. But it's really interesting seeing how much people trying to get answers in like this world that a lot of people dismiss, how much damage you can do by just engaging with people and trying to be like befriending them. Like the way that Richard Doty was able to effectively hoodwink a bunch of people in the UFO community to the point where he now has had it's hard to separate him from UFO mythology and the ideas he has presented and brought into it. It's hard to separate them from it. Like it's now just this blob of stuff, and you can't take him out of it, and people will believe things that he put into the world forever. Like it just is going to be around.
Yeah. At the same time, it's a pretty, reasonable argument to say like I forget who says it, but there's the guy who's like, well, we already have the public, interested in this UFO story. And if, Paul Benowitz sees something that is secret government technology but believes it's UFOs, then hell yeah, we run with that. We run with that story. And if that I guess can be extrapolated to just the general public. If the public is into UFOs, then hell yeah, we run that story so that people, any weird technology or whatever that's seen can just be aliens. I mean, just think about what's happening with UFOs in the last couple of years, quote unquote UFOs being officially discussed by the government and all this shit that's being put out saying like, we can...
disclosure is coming.
Yeah, disclosure is coming, or just like even these articles claiming that like certain people who are ex-military are coming out of the fucking woodwork. Lou Elizondo just like, I know for a fact UFOs are real and all this. It's just such... it's just good at creating confusion.
Yeah. It really just, more than anything, I think the thesis of this documentary more than anything is like the most effective tool against us learning anything for real is disinformation. Like it is it has just muddied the waters so much by having these people just come, like all the places where Doty was like, that wasn't even me. I didn't have anything to do with that. That was the NSA or whatever. And you don't even know if you can believe that.
Yeah.
It is it gets in your head a little bit.
Yeah, and I think too, one of the things that I always found, because I bring this up sometimes on the show, I've had family members ask me, because of the articles and stuff coming out about UFOs and people claiming it's real and all this stuff. When you tell them, I think it's disinformation. I think it's all bullshit. I think it's just meant to create confusion. The hard part comes when they ask you why. Because I don't know if I have a good answer. I mean, I think the very basic answer is just that, it sounds so paranoid to say, but you don't want people paying too close attention to whatever the fuck it is that we're doing. You want to keep certain things secret. You don't want people paying attention. Or you could even say, you could say it's just, it's trying to draw attention generally, and not even from something specifically too. Cause it just seems like maybe we could be, not saying we need to specifically cover up this event or this thing. But it is just generally helpful to have the public be confused because the government, is fucking shady. I mean,
it really just, maybe take this as you will, but the best way I can explain it to somebody that this is a thing that I think my parents would give me a strange look if I said that to them was the government basically views you as an enemy that has to be controlled. And that's why are they doing it? Because then you don't know what's actually going on. And on that note, I get, look, all of this skepticism within reason. I'm not fucking going into a New World Order conspiracy or anything like that. I swear to God, I'm not. It just is. It just there is a callous calculation. The more you read about how the government stuff works behind the scenes and everything, that your well-being doesn't really factor into it. And that's just a thing. The cost analysis is on national security, not your well-being. So,
quote unquote national security, also lots and lots of dollars. It's a lot of different factors. And I do think that does draw suspicion from I have family members who are generally pretty progressive people, but as soon as you start saying well, you can't trust the government, you sound weird. It's hard not to sound weird to family who's just why all this UFO crap. I can tell them I don't believe it's aliens and all that, and I can tell them, I think that it's not a legitimate. It's a legitimate phenomenon with illegitimate background, I guess. But yeah, as soon as you start saying you described that the government kind of, enemy's a strong word, but the United States government sort of treats just its citizens as enemies. It's that sounds very weird, but I think the way you put it was good. It's just, it is hard when people generally don't, bother to read about all the fucked up shit that the government did and does. So it does come across, there's I guess the older folks, a lot of the boomer generation are not really viewing the government that way. It's why would they want to, doesn't the government help us to do this or that? But it's I don't know. I'm rambling at this point, but it is really hard to articulate because I feel crazy trying to talk about this because I want to talk about it rationally and with skepticism, but there's just too many fucked up things that have happened for me not to feel crazy.
There's a point where you start feeling like the person that just posts about how the CIA invented the term conspiracy theorist to like stop free thinkers. There's a point where you start feeling like that guy, and you really don't want to be that guy. So you like, you take a break and you go watch an episode of The Simpsons or something, which I've been doing that lately. Fucking Early Simpsons is some of the best shit that's ever been put on TV. But it's, I guess, like, it's good to be aware of this kind of stuff, even if it's not, even if you should probably take it with a grain of, even the level of paranoia you get from this stuff, take with a grain of salt. Everything is like, believe, take in everything, believe nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. It sucks. It's,
I feel so weird on this episode where it's just like, I keep starting things like I'm going to make like a very rational point. And then I'm like, the government thinks you're evil and is trying to take, and it's like, oh, God damn it.
No, I get what you're saying. Like, I 100% feel you. Like, I distrust the United States government, but I'm not like, I don't know. I don't know what to say. Like, I would consider myself, it's not in a conspiracy way, but I guess it is kind of in a conspiracy way because, like, there are real conspiracies out there that have occurred. And it just is a not reasonable, but it is a more reasonable explanation. This is a more reasonable explanation than alien visitation, right? Like, the phenomenon exists, the UFO phenomenon happens, but it's, I just am not the alien idea, the extraterrestrial hypothesis, as they call it. It doesn't track for me. It's too fantastical. It's too inconsistent. It's all these different things. But you can convince me that the government wants to do a psyop, just plain and simple. Like, you can convince me that the government wants to do a psyop. Like, I believe that. Yeah. We have evidence of these things happening throughout history. We have evidence that those things were kept secret for a long time. But it like sort of, or like an Ouroboros accomplishes its own goal and makes you feel and sound crazy to certain people. Like, I feel crazy, and I know my family thinks that I'm crazy when I say the kind of shit that I'm saying right now. So it really is one of those things where you have to live with it, and it's like I don't think I'm actually that far gone or anything. It just is. It's one of those things you just have to. We've learned too much doing this for this long, but I was just thinking, how like throughout the history of this podcast, there's been like one episode a year that I get like really unhinged on, and either go like angry or whatever. Yes,
it really feels like this might be in the running for this year.
It's cool. We can be unhinged together. We can be unhinged together. And really genuinely at the end of the day, like, do I believe all this stuff without, like, no, I don't believe it, but I find the narrative more compelling, I guess, than aliens. And, I also just don't think we'll ever get the full truth about any of this. So the other side to all of it that makes you feel fucking crazy is you, at a certain point, have to throw up your hands and say, yeah, I don't know. It's weird.
That's kind of one of the things that I like about this documentary from like from that standpoint is it kind of comes to the same conclusion. Because towards the end of it, they start talking about the like Holloman Air Force Base like footage of the an alien craft landing, someone getting out and talking to some people on the base, and then getting back in the craft and going back up, and it gets into how this kind of tactic with Richard Doty and everything gets used with filmmakers and documentarians and people to basically get them to sign off on content for the government, and they can then quash whatever they want to, or interfere in whatever ways they need to. And it just starts they start talking to a guy that was working, I forget exactly what he was doing, but he was working on some movie, and they were going to try to get this footage. They signed a contract with the government or with the Air Force. I forget exactly who it was. And they go in and meet and talk about the stuff, and they keep asking him, but did you ever actually see the footage? And he goes, not really.
Yeah.
So you saw stills, and it's like, yeah, I saw a still, and they showed me this little clip of a thing, but they never actually showed me in full. So for my documentary, we had to use an animation, and I was like, wow, they like the level of just like they're going to dick you around and make your life hard, and in return give you nothing is just it's really funny. The result of the documentary is like you're not going to get any answers. There are no easy answers in this thing. Doty says, it's like 25% truth and 75% lie or whatever the fuck, but you can't take a single word that comes out of his mouth at face value, so you're never going to fucking know.
Yeah.
And you got to find peace with that.
Yeah. I have found peace with that, and I've accepted that a lot of this will end up just being fun or entertaining stories for me. But the grand narrative of ufology is something that I'm going to feel compelled to continue to chase until I feel like I've covered as many angles as I can find, and and yeah, you end up with a big fat zero. There is just nothing to really take away from it. But I do think at the very least it's pretty obvious who's a fucking shyster, right? Like,
oh yeah, but there's even inside of that there's like multiple different levels. There's the people that are just shilling something strange and their quote unquote experiences with it to make a buck, and those people I can find entertaining. But then there's the people like Doty who are actively hurting people.
Yeah. Yeah.
In less than just having people buy a book that's false,
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think, the story of Paul Benowitz is fucking tragic.
Heartbreaking.
It's a bummer. And I do think that the unfortunate thing is with the internet and with the UFO mythology readily accessible in the conspiracy mythologies and all that, people don't really need a Richard Doty to step in and push them in a direction, because they do it to themselves now.
We're here for that.
I had a very I guess that's true. I had a very I had a chill go down my spine during parts of this documentary where I was like, this is honestly not even that different from QAnon, where it's different, but I just mean like the structure of like somebody putting out this disinfo and it's spiraling out to the point where like people are able to just create their own disinfo back at themselves. That was what happened with QAnon. Like it's the same idea.
The thing that Doty got to, where he basically was talking about how it is just this recursive loop where he hasn't even he claims fucking whatever. He claims that he all he did was basically at a couple points came in and made a document or sent this thing or the other thing, but a lot of it just kind of happens on its own and just kind of grows out of whatever on its own accord. And so it's this now it's just this the UFO community has become its own disinformation engine, because even the Majestic 12 stuff, which is entirely fucked up and fake, still gets brought up and is now getting mutated into other forms because the Doty version is fake, but this is the real version. And so there's just this continuous cycle that will never cease.
It's this is the actual sad thing to me about this is because of its ability to sort of self-perpetuate, I I think that it has been kind of over for ufology for decades. I just think it's if Richard Doty was genuinely some sort of secret disinfo project to just throw ufology off its axis and make it, into this monster of confusion and disinfo, I think that project was very much successful, and I think that I just think that it's kind of like maybe we just need to move on, or not move on, but like look at UFO stuff holistically from above, because it's all now so it's so unbelievably tangled up in this stuff that it's just, you can't just like check out a single node of it, right? Like
so you're basically saying we have to just like effectively just kind of start over, and try to cut out as much of what we claim to know and start from scratch.
I've genuinely thought about that at length before. If I had no job, if my job was to investigate this stuff, I would try and come up with a way to start over, because it's fucked. It's so fucked. You would have to just gather up as much as you can and check these connections and try and figure out what is able to be confirmed in any meaningful way whatsoever. And I have a feeling it will be very little.
Yeah.
And then you would have to take it, pick it up, set it over here, and start from the beginning. Like set it to the side and start from the beginning, but with the context of this is all fucked up and muddied. But then there's also the question of, can you even access information about this stuff at all that isn't going to be muddied or in one way or another, right? Like just people, as soon as it's kind of gone through the filter of the internet, it's never, I don't know quite what I'm getting at here. It's just like I think, can't get to the bottom of this story. I think it's an infinite carrot on a stick, and it's fucked up. And so I'll continue talking about all these stories and all these people and stuff, and I still find it fascinating and entertaining. But I can't help but view ufology that way now. It's unfortunate, but I think that's where we are. And somebody, I would hope somebody is up for the task of tackling it in the way that I kind of described, God,
I hope so. Some eccentric, like well-off person that doesn't really need to work. Just, there's worse ways to spend a life,
Yeah. There are good people out there who I think do good research. But it's just, I don't know. It's there's also, for every good person who is clever and intelligent in how they research this stuff, there's about a dozen people who are doing the exact opposite. It's tough. I don't know.
You got to work as hard as Rich Doty did to undo his work.
I guess so.
He's got a head start on you. Yeah, yet again, I'm using that because he's the one that's in the documentary and he's the one that got outed, basically. I'm sure there are like all sorts of other people that did the exact same thing as Doty, and he's symptomatic of a larger effort by the government. Man. Yeah, this documentary is fascinating. If you haven't seen this, and have any interest in the world of UFOs, it's definitely worth your time. Also, this documentary do you remember when this came out?
Either 2013 or 2014, I want to say.
Yeah.
2014.
I'm sure there are people that have like since then ripped this thing to shreds in some way. Like, are there any responses to Mirage Men that are worth looking at? That you know of.
Yeah,
I would love to hear any people that have like heard of, because now the UFO community has had 10 years to kind of respond to this thing. if anyone has anything like that, send it our way. I'd be very curious to read it.
Yeah, I'd be curious if there's people out there countering anything in here as well. Just to see what they're trying to say. But I do think, this documentary is very much worth checking out. I want to finish this fucking book. It's going to happen someday. I can't even, I'm sorry, total aside, but I cannot even begin to stress how goddamn busy my July has been. It has been fucking crazy. So it'll happen someday, and August is not going to let up either. So, oh my God. But I would be curious to see, the community's response and what different people are saying about it. So it's good. And I do know that a lot of people hold the book in high regard, though. So it's
look, this is because it doesn't try to convince me that aliens exist or don't exist. It just is talking about like effectively drama in the community by way of the government. This documentary comes off a lot more credible than a lot of the ones we watch. So like I don't know, but hey, that could just be because I don't know enough to debunk it. So I think it's really cool.
Yeah. So is this oh my God, is this a fuck your documentary?
Yeah. Are you just realizing that?
Do we want to give our typical review style here?
Yeah. So let's do that and figure out who this is for,
Yeah.
Do the biz. So I got to figure out I got to formulate how this is coming out of my mouth,
I say that every time before I get in front of the fucking microphone for this podcast. I'll start if you're okay with that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because this is my second time seeing it. I've had some time to digest some of it, and it's still being digested. But here's my review. Fuck your documentary, positive style. That's a positive.
Yeah. Okay. That is interesting because I was originally thinking of something along the lines of like, fuck your documentary. But I'm not angry at the documentarians. The documentary is actually very well produced and it's a good documentary. It just elicited things within me. So I guess, depending on how you want to take that, this is that is how I felt watching it. Was like, obviously I got on a podcast and have just been like yelling for fucking 60 minutes. So I guess that's a worthwhile thing. I'll leave it at that. That's how I'm feeling.
Yeah, no, and for people out there who is this for? Well, there's a relatively good mix of credulous and skeptical people in this documentary. It doesn't seem, like you said, it's not really trying to convince you of aliens, but it does seem to suggest to you that there is a conspiracy against the UFO community, and perhaps the American public at large. And take that or leave that, I suppose. You don't come away with any true answers, but I think if you are entertained by UFO stuff but don't know much about it, great documentary. If you're deep in the UFO stuff and somehow haven't seen this, great documentary. I think this is for just about anybody, but the people who are like if there's somebody who, is just like, I don't care about UFOs, I don't like that stuff, then okay, yeah, you probably won't enjoy this. But this is better than the kind of shit you're going to see on like the Discovery Channel or whatever, or Ancient Aliens garbage. This is much better.
Yeah. So, this is one of the wider interests, I think, just because it's I think even like true crime people would get into this because of the Paul Benowitz angle. Like, I think there are even people that are just into like a dark story.
Yeah, they're perverts who desire human suffering.
Yeah. If you're into human suffering, then you might want to check this out. So yeah, I think this is a pretty broad in terms of UFO documentaries. This has the widest net of any of the ones we've watched. It, the only thing that has a higher net would probably be some of the like you know, the sleep documentary we watch, the stuff about
Sure.
Richard Asher.
Asher.
Rodney Asher.
Rodney Asher. Sorry.
Those documentaries probably are wider appeal than this, but this is pretty wide.
Yeah. So good documentary, kind of frustrating in its way, but very interesting, very entertaining. I guess the only thing I'm, sorry about is I'm sorry that ufology's over. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm so sorry.
Died.
So
it's sorry okay, ufology died and Richard Doty killed it.
Well, that was a fun one. Are you ready to take care of some business?
Yeah, let's do this. So if you want to find more of this podcast and find us on social media, we're on Twitter at IGW Podcast.
You can follow us on Facebook.com/ItGetsWeirdPodcast.
And we're on all your favorite podcatchers, from Stitcher to Google Play to Apple Podcasts to Spotify. I need to excise Stitcher out of that because I think it's dying soon. But if you listen to podcasts somewhere, look up It Gets Weird, and we're probably there.
Twitch.tv/ItGetsWeird. When I'm not fucking traveling across the country constantly for work or whatever, I do try to stream on the weekends, playing some video games, oftentimes with friend of the show, Colin, and email us, itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com. Send us the sort of responses that, if you found responses to Mirage Men by the UFO community or not, or I guess not, send them our way. We'd love to read them. Do some research for us for once.
Yeah, we've been doing research for 7 years. So why don't you... No, I'm kidding.
Patreon.com/ItGetsWeird. We have a $2 tier and a $5 tier. At the $2 tier, you get access to the bonus show, It Gets Weird TV, where right now we're finishing up season 1 of The X-Files. If you donate to the show at the $2 or the $5 tier, you get to then also vote what show we watch next. So once we finish The X-Files, you can tell us, hey, you're watching this, or you're watching that. You're watching Kolchak the Night Stalker. You're watching fucking Scooby-Doo. You get to tell us. Then at the $5 tier, you get access to It Gets Weird TV plus another bonus show that comes out in the off weeks of It Gets Weird TV. So you're getting bonus episodes every single week. Whether you donate to the $2 tier or the $5 tier, you get access to the main show 2 days early on Friday instead of Sunday, and you get access to the Discord where we're hanging out with all kinds of listeners and fans of the show, talking about all kinds of stuff, UFOs, conspiracies, cryptids, all of it. So if that sounds good to you, donate at the $2 tier or the $5 tier. There's also a $1 tier where you don't get anything out of it. You're just getting the satisfaction of kicking a tip our way, saying, hey, I like the show. Thanks for doing what you do. Here's $1. If you can't donate, however, please tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your congressman all about It Gets Weird podcast.
All right. Thank you all for listening to this Fuck Your Documentary episode of It Gets Weird. I've been Nile.
And I'm Kyle, signing out.
Peace.